Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Maria Carnamola, and I'm the Executive Director at Gathering Ground. And on behalf of our entire team, I want to welcome all of you today to our briefing, Eliminating Friction and Conflict in Decision-Making Processes with Ted Rao. Today's session is going to be interactive. We'll have breakout sessions throughout the briefing, and that will be provide you with an opportunity to practice some of the skills that you'll learn today. So we're really excited about that. Before we start, or let's start, I should say, with a land and labor acknowledgement, which is the way Gathering Ground loves to start all of our programs. So Anaya, would you read the land acknowledgement for us?
We read this land acknowledgement, which is offered by the Nanticoke Lenni Lenape Tribal Nation for those who seek to honor the Lenape people and their territory, preceding an event in Lenapehoking, also known as New Jersey. The land upon which we gather is part of the traditional territory of the Lenni Lenape called Lenapehoking. The Lenape people lived in harmony with one another upon this territory for thousands of years. During the colonial era and early federal period, many were removed west and north, but some also remain among the continuing historical tribal communities of the region. The Nanticoke Lenni Lenape Tribal Nation, the Ramapo Lenape Nation, the Powhatan Lenape Nation, the Nanticoke of Millsboro, Delaware, and the Lenape of Chesapeake, Delaware. We acknowledge the Lenni Lenape as the original people of this land and their continuing relationship with their territory. In our acknowledgement of the continued presence of Lenape people in their homeland, we affirm the aspiration of the great Lenape chief Tamanin that there be harmony between the indigenous people of this land and the descendants of the immigrants to this land, as long as the rivers and creeks flow and the sun, moon, and stars shine.
Thank you, Anaya. This labor acknowledgement is offered by Dr. T.J. Stewart, Assistant Professor of Higher Education and Student Affairs at Iowa State University. We must acknowledge that much of what we know of this country today, including its culture, economic growth, and development throughout history and across time, has been made possible by the labor of enslaved Africans and their ascendants who suffered the horror of the transatlantic trafficking of their people, chattel slavery, and Jim Crow. We are indebted to their labor and their sacrifice, and we must acknowledge the tremors of that violence throughout the generations and the resulting impact that can be still felt and witnessed today. For us at Gathering Ground, we read these statements to make visible what has been invisible to many people, particularly people racialized as white. We acknowledge these historical truths of the theft of people and land, enslavement, forced migration, and forced labor. And though this is our history, it must not be our future. We at Gathering Ground are committed to working in community and constant dialogue with all of you in disrupting this fatalistic view and create new norms and new structures for a more equitable world. Gathering Ground offers a variety of programs designed to address systemic issues and empower individuals to become agents of positive changes. It's because of our commitment to equity and justice that we're bringing this briefing to you today. At Gathering Ground, we believe that participatory decision-making models and frameworks allow everyone to have a voice and to have a direct say in decision-making that affect their lives. Participatory decision-making practices offer a viable, equitable alternative to hierarchical structures that leave the majority voiceless and powerless. We hope to broaden our thinking and our learning about other ways of organizing our communities and our workplaces. Today's briefing is just one of many exciting programs we have on the horizon. So I won't get into that, but I ask that you stay connected with us so you can learn about all the amazing upcoming workshops and events we have. And I know Naya will put the link in the chat for you to join our newsletter so you can stay connected. I want to quickly recognize the people who have been working on today's briefing and who made it possible. The team at Gathering Ground, we have Casey O'Brien, our Director of Programming, Anaya Brown, our Communications Associate, that read our land acknowledgement for us, and Alyssa Prevost, who's our Operations Associate, who's not with us today. She's on her honeymoon, actually, so This work is made possible with the support of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation, and the Grunin Foundation. I want to thank all of you for making it a point to be with us today in your very busy schedules. I know there are a lot of conflicting, competing events, so thanks for prioritizing this briefing today in your busy schedules. I'm going to tell you a little bit about TED, and then I'll pass it over to you, Ted. Ted Rao is an advocate, trainer, and consultant for self-governance. His main focus is sociocracy. After his PhD in linguistics and work in academia, he co-founded the membership organization Sociocracy for All in 2016, which has grown to 250 members with several international and topic-focused departments and action teams. Ted spends his day consulting with mission-driven organizations, teaching, and deeply immersed in the work as a member within Sociocracy for All. Ted has 5 children between 12 and 22. A German citizen, he has lived in Massachusetts since 2010. He is the co-author of Weir books on self-governance, Many Voices, One Song in 2018, Who Decides in 2021, Collective Power 2023, From Here to There 2025, and working on a project on organizational governance beyond the control paradigm. You can find more information about Ted Rao and Sociocracy for All at sociocracyforall.org. And without further ado, I want to first thank you, Ted, for being with us today. And we're excited to have you, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, there we are talking about consent decision making, which of course I will say plenty about. Before I go there, I want to just let you know real briefly that consent decision making is a part of this thing that's called sociocracy, which is a more complete governance system with all the bells and whistles and parts. So what you're getting today is kind of one part of that, about a third of it. And as that, it's a useful standalone tool. So what will happen here is that we will go back and forth between several modes. One is the mode where I'm talking you through slides, as one does. And then some more doing-oriented parts where I will ask you to do things in breakouts, where I will ask some volunteers to do something with me for everybody to watch, so that we'll always go like have different parts of ourselves used in the process. And then we will also pause and stop for questions along the way. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to put it into like useful chunks, because it can be a lot at once. So it might happen that if you ask questions that I'll say, yeah, we'll get to that later. But that shouldn't keep you from asking. If you are one of the people who don't like interrupting, but you do have a question and you're not sure whether it fits right now or not, put it in the chat and I will try to monitor, and the team here will try to monitor, and between all of us, we'll figure it out. So with that, I will go to consent decision making. And consent decision making, as I said, is a decision making method. And typically, this is not something that we learn in school, though I think we absolutely should. And that is looking at different decision making methods of what decision making methods even exist. And here are some of them. The first one that we all know, it is a decision-making method, though it's it's not one that you would have counted necessarily. It's when somebody is the boss, right? Something we don't tend to love when it's a country that is run that way. We seem to completely find it okay if a business is run that way. Interesting. Anyway, and I'm just putting them next to each other. I think some of them have their place. One of the disadvantages of autocratic decision-making is, of course, that so many voices are not heard. And that's sad for the people that are not being heard. And it's also sad for the organization, because now there are viewpoints that may never see the light of day, which means we might be lacking really relevant information. So even putting aside the idea of inclusion and participation, just thinking as an organization, it's not a good idea to close your eyes from information that is relevant because people might know something that you will never hear about. So it's simply not wise to operate that way in many regards. Then the next one is majority vote, right? We all know that. In this case here, in this little more symbolic way of looking at it, we would have 3 people voting for something and 2 people voting against, and that would mean this proposal passes. The disadvantage of that is that there's still 59%, or in this case, 2 out of 5, that voted no, and we don't know why. Did they just say, oh, I wanted something else more, or I'm having a bad day right now, or I don't like any of you, so that's why I'm saying no to whatever? Or did they have really, really important reasons to say, actually, this proposal is not going to work? And I know that because of the area of work that I do. So both of those decision-making methods come with that element of gambling, right? Because we're not actually taking in the information that might be super relevant to what we do. And then the last decision-making method that I want to focus on here is consensus. And in consensus, there are different forms of practicing consensus, but most typically what people understand as consensus is we talk till everybody agrees. Right. And now we don't have that disadvantage of gambling so hard because we do listen to everybody. But we also all know that that comes with its own disadvantages, and that is that sometimes there's a lot of talking that is needed here, which is its own blind spot in a way, because maybe something actually needs some swift action, and then we might not be able to do that. So consent, which I will talk about, by the way, that's like, this is subtle, but consent with a T at the end, right? It's kind of the closest to consensus, but it is explicitly different from consent. And here is how consent works. So here we have the space where everybody agrees. And let's imagine there's a proposal on the table. And some of us say, yeah, that's the proposal I want. That's great. I want exactly that. That's my first choice. I love it. And if everybody says that, that would be like a consensus decision, right? But what do we do with the people who say, well, that's not what I wanted, but there's also nothing wrong with it? Could we maybe move forward anyway if we say, we include the people who say, this is not my first choice, but it works as well? Some people call this the range of tolerance. Well, this is the preference here. And in consent decision-making, we broaden this area and say, no, we actually do include everybody who says this is good enough. So basically it becomes like a binary system of everybody who doesn't object consents. So I object means the same as I don't consent, and I consent means the same as I don't object. It's exactly complementary. One slogan that some of you might even have heard because it's quite catchy, people often remember it, is good enough for now, safe enough to try. So consent, we're not looking to make everybody 100% happy in terms of giving them their preference, but we're just saying, yeah, this is good enough. We can get started with this one. And by the way, that does assume or presume that we will look at this decision again. Just good enough all the time is not quite good enough. It's good enough for now, and then we improve it over time. But the idea is to get a show on the road earlier so that we can learn from experience instead of from hypothesizing. Because when we do a lot of talking and we try to convince each other, we sometimes don't really stay connected so much to reality and more connected to what might happen, what could happen, what if this and what if that and that. You know, we kind of get all in our heads, while the idea is to just check for red flags, and if there is no red flag, do it and then learn from that practical experience. So it's intentionally a very practice-focused decision-making method. Just looking at not making silly mistakes. Now, the idea is, right, if these are like all the ranges of tolerance and the preferences, and we have more than one person, then we would hardly get anything done if we always try to get everybody their preference, while we have a lot more to work with if we're just getting everybody what they don't object to. So again, the idea is the more we try out, the more we learn, the more experience we gather, the better we can actually relate to reality instead of what I already said, what's in our heads. Another really interesting thing about that is that consent is evaluated with the backdrop of the aim, and the aim is the thing that we decide to do together. So a group of people in the setup is not just a set of individuals, it is actually a group of people that works together on a certain aim, or call it mission, call it goal, call it whatever, purpose. But you have something that is more than the whole, more than its parts, right? So you have something that you come together for, that you can only do together. That's the aim in sociocracy jargon. Now, you would only object if something is at odds with the aim. So you can't object because you say, I don't like it, or I'm having a bad day today, or I don't like your shirt. You can only object if you say, there is actually a problem here, and it's not going to give us what we said we would do. It actually will actively undermine what we said we would do in some secondary fashion. And that's exactly why we ask, because we want everybody to think for a moment think about all the things we're doing. Here's the proposal. Do you think there's any negative downside, any negative side effects here that you should bring up? In that case, please tell us so that we can avoid the most obvious mistakes and then try it out. That's the intention. Now, I'm going to go to one other thing before we try something out, which is, how do we ask for consent? So there's one more piece you need to know before we can try something out, which is, what are the steps of getting to consent? And one of the practices that we use in sociocracy is rounds, which some of you might know as circle practice. It's not something that is unique to sociocracy, but it's very, very common in sociocracy. And it's the simple practice of speaking one by one by one by one instead of talking all over each other, right? So it's the strict practice of having some discipline, of making sure everybody is actually heard. Now, there are 3 rounds to check for consent. The first round is to make sure that everybody understands the proposal. And we will play that in a moment, where we will see there's a proposal, and first we're just going to ask each person, do you understand it? Or are there any questions? And if there are questions to answer, we answer them. Sometimes we don't know the answer, then we just move on. So we answer whatever we can answer. Then the second round is, what do you think about this? What comes up for you? What are you feeling? Whatever you want to say. So that's another round where everybody speaks to that. It's ideal to keep it a little limited in terms of time, to not like allow 10-minute statements, but I mean, if that were ever justified, that's fine too. But the more typical practice is that somebody will say like 3 sentences. I really think that's a great idea. Thank you so much for working on it. I think this is going to work out well. I'm a little concerned about this and this and that, but I think it's fine. That would be a typical quick reaction. And then the last question is, do you see any objection? Is there any reason of why this might somehow create a situation where we're shooting ourselves in the foot? And notice there's a subtle difference between quick reactions and consent. We can reflect on that later after you try it out. But I just want you to feel into that. Quick reaction has more to do with what comes up for me in general, right? It's more of the attention is on me and my own feeling, sensing space. While the consent round is more thinking for the group. So now I'm putting myself into the group and I'm thinking, is there any red flag here? So it's slightly energetically different, but it comes with practice to be able to really distinguish that. Okay. Let me check on time. I would love to try something out, but if there's super urgent questions right now, like urgent to the level of you have a hard time listening because you're so distracted by your question, then I'd rather hear the question right now. Seeing none. Sounds like ranked choice voiding a little. Yes, and that it takes more nuance then, right? Okay. I will show you what we will try out, and then we will also go into trying out right away. My promise was to keep it as practical as possible, which is also how I like it. So let's have a good. Okay. Imagine you are running some sort of a co-working space. Does everybody know what a co-working space is? Like an office in town where people go if they're sick of working at home or of commuting. It looks a little bit like this. Lots of people with computers sitting there doing their respective things. So these might be freelancers, remote workers, whatever. And let's say this is some sort of a cooperatively run co-working space. Now we have one group, one circle in sociocracy language, so one team that has as its aim to make sure that this area here, this environment for the freelancers and remote workers that come to work in our space, that is productive and collaborative. So the aim is creating a productive and collaborative environment for freelancers and remote workers. Now, let's say there have been a few discussions because some people said, well, it's actually not so productive because everything is so loud that I can't even come here to work because it's so noisy. So now somebody comes with a proposal and says, I have an idea how to solve that and to make it more collaborative and productive. Let's introduce quiet hours from 10 to 2 every day. And that's when people can do deep work without any meetings or loud conversations. And by the way, if you find yourself having a reaction to the proposal, just keep in mind that I massaged this proposal for learning purposes. I'm not saying we should do that. So don't get all upset with me. This is just for learning, okay? It's obvious that it has a few holes. That's the whole point of it. Okay. Now, what I want you to do is, there's going to be several instructions at once. So this is a good moment to pay attention. You will, I should give you the link to the slide. I realize that. Okay, I will do that in a moment. You will find yourself in a breakout. You will have to appoint pretty quickly. So don't talk about it for 10 minutes. Who will be the facilitator? And who will be the person bringing the proposal? Okay. So one of you is the one who says, we should do this proposal and have quiet time. And then another person is the facilitator. And then the facilitator will go through 3 different rounds. And the whole learning objective of this breakout is just to feel the difference of the 3 different rounds. So just this on the left here. First, you're gonna just do a round where people ask questions. Or they say, I understand the proposal. And here I wrote that as a reminder to myself and also to you. Go easy on questions. We all know how to ask questions and answer questions. That's not the point of this exercise. Okay. In reality, of course, you would want to pay attention there because it's important that you decide something you understand. But in this situation, you're not running a co-working space. I assume I'm not. So we can take it easy. Okay. So ask a question or two and then move on. I don't want you to spend the whole breakout time just on answering questions on hypothetical situations we're not a part of. Okay. So 1 or 2 questions and then just let it go. And the person who's bringing the proposal, so the author of the proposal, can answer those questions. Then you go into a reaction round where everybody just says what they think, and please make sure that people don't interrupt each other and everybody speaks once before somebody speaks a second time. Ideally, you actually only do 1 round. So everybody speaks once in each round. And then you do a consent round and people only say whether they consent or object, and maybe a sentence about why they object. We will not play the objections right now. We will do that later. Right now, I only want you to feel the difference between the 3 rounds. Okay. Any questions on what I want from you? And I have to give you the link though. I failed to think about that before. Oh, I actually have the link. Look at that. Okay. So that should bring you to the right slide already, actually. Okay, so we will do.
Sorry, Rosie, is that a yes, you have a question?
No, yes, it's the right slide is how I interpreted it.
Oh, okay, great.
Maybe Rosie can tell us if that's not how I. Okay, so we will have maybe 11 minutes from now on. 11 minutes means you're not in a rush, but you also can take 5 minutes doing a big get to know and explaining each other what you had for dinner or lunch. So, moving into the exercise relatively swiftly, going through the rounds relatively swiftly, not in a rush, but don't spend too much time. Okay, and then we'll come back and hear how it was.
Great. So folks, I'm going to drop you into your breakout rooms in just a moment. I will encourage you, if you can, and if you're able, to launch your cameras and to come off mute so you could be in conversation with each other. If you can't, I know, Vicky, for example, I know you're not feeling so hot, so that's great. If you can contribute via chat, if you're not able to be on camera or on audio for some reason, that would be great too, so that we all have a chance to practice this. Okay, folks, here we go, and we'll see you all back in a few.
Hello.
Hey, Debbie, how are you?
Oh, okay.
And let's see, let me get you assigned, Debbie. Hang on one second.
Yeah, I was watching.
Oh, I cut Debbie off. All right,
Debbie,
hang on.
That was good.
Okay. So, Joni, can I just say, Joni, your question was so great, and I would love, I'm sure Ted will have some reactions, but if it's not answered, I would love for you to ask Ted. As we bumped up into some of like the challenges of like the idea versus the method.
Explain. Who brought that up?
No, everyone was so excited and thinking about the idea and not sticking to the importance of moving through the rounds.
I
Yes.
see. Yes.
And Joni actually brought us back to that. And it was, so I think, yeah, Joni, that would be really good if you asked the question again. And that way we can all get a better understanding.
No,
Do it.
like, what did I ask? I
I didn't mean
made
to put you on the spot,
observation.
Jean.
It was an observation that in my initial asking clarifying questions for us to be able to figure out what each person's role was, the group had agreed originally that there was going to be the facilitator and then the person bringing the proposal. However, as we were going through the scenario, the facilitator then also became the person bringing forth the proposal, and we weren't going through the rounds as quickly as possible. So I guess my question would then be, when that happens, how do we get the group back to how we are supposed to be facilitating a conversation?
Yeah, let me speak to that real quick. To me, it's a little bit like learning how to dance, actually, and all playing an instrument in a band. Ideally, you have somebody who's orchestrating, or like everybody is following the same this or that. But if people don't know how to dance, it is also harder, because then you have to kind of orchestrate like with more, you have to kind of hold the reins a little tighter. Sure, whatever, but whatever the best English way of saying it is. But if everybody knows how to do it, you also don't have to enforce so heavily anymore because everybody already knows, So it makes it's kind of it's a two-sided thing. It's the group and the facilitator, but it is, I mean, it is the facilitator that needs to hold it. The other question that is related to what you're saying, or kind of wrapped in it, is what is the role of the facilitator? Are they also are they allowed to have questions and opinions? And what about that? who's bringing new proposals, all of that. We can go there as well. Is there anything else you want to say right now in response, or do you want me to go through those things, Jenny?
Not me specifically. I
Okay.
can also invite my teammates if they had any other thoughts as well.
No, I was, when I was speaking with Ambrielle, we thought we were actually going through it, but that was great observation what she had. So that kind of like set us back, like, okay, maybe we need to look at the method and how we propose the method. And like you just said, Ted, how do we dance at this? Like, I ain't gonna lie, I'm a Black girl. I'm supposed to know how to dance. I don't know how to dance.
Yeah.
But, just the idea of that, just understanding, okay, what steps do you really take? Or do we understand the dance versus like you got a dance called a two-step and then you got cha-cha.
Yeah.
Similar moves, right? But
Yes.
different dances. So
Yeah.
so I get it. So yeah, that's a great point right there. Like how pretty much understanding the method. And thank you so much, Amrielle, for actually bringing that out too, because I thought so too. Like, wait a minute. And then you want to be instructed to the point where you kind of do know, goes back to that quote unquote understanding.
There's a thing I want to point out real quick here, which is, I guess, really that what you're bringing up is also that clarity of understanding. First of all, how does this work? Are we all following the same mental models here? And the other one is just the clarity of thinking that we don't typically have in our everyday conversations. And here's an example. This was brought to me actually by somebody I trained, and this was like a couple. They were in their late 70s. And they told me, don't read it yet. Hold on, don't look at it. I want you to listen to me first. Why am I sharing when I want you to listen? They were in their late 70s and they told me, oh, you know what? We've been married, like, I don't know, they got married young. They must have been married like 60 years, some astronomical number to me. And they told me, oh, learning about consent decision-making changed how we talk to each other. I was like, what? Tell me about that. And they told us, well, when one of us says, let's go see a movie on Saturday, and then the other one says, well, what about our dinner plans? We would tend to argue. And now they are aware that there are three different responses amongst all, like at least three, that one can have. So let me show you that. I actually turned this into a slide, what they told me. So imagine somebody says, let's go see a movie on Saturday. And the other person says, what about our dinner plans? This can be a clarifying question. Oh, you're saying the proposal is to go see a movie on Saturday. I am asking the question of how does that relate to our dinner plans? Is it before, instead, after? Explain. It could be a clarifying question. It could also be just a reaction of like, oh, I thought we had dinner plans, but whatever, movie sounds great. Or it could be an objection. We could actually say, what? Movie? No, we have dinner plans. Don't you remember? And in our everyday conversation, we're so sloppy on this kind of stuff. Now, between two people, that's sloppy. Now put a group of 6 people into the room. And then we really have to pay a little attention. That's why sometimes they call it like rounds hygiene, like a little bit of, sorry, right now it is questions and right now it is reactions, not in a super dogmatic way, but really trying to hold a little bit of the boundary just so that we don't talk about very different things at the same time, because then nobody's listening to each other anymore because we're all in different places. So just for the sake of moving together, it is good to rally people a little bit around, for example, this 3-step process. Comment on what we do with a facilitator. If the facilitator is good at this and the group is good at it, then the facilitator is pretty free to participate as a member as well. You can say, let's do a round of questions. You start somewhere, you put yourself somewhere in the middle of the round. So when it comes to you, you can just ask your questions like any other member, and then the round continues. And then when the round is over, you say, great, thanks, let's do reactions. And you put yourself into the middle again. So you can basically buy yourself free time and attention, but that only works, in a group that where you don't have to be that much hands-on.
Is there any magic about the middle versus the end?
Yeah, the middle is because then it's very clear to people who you're speaking as. They don't have to ask themselves, are you now blurring your own opinions into what should happen next in the process? You're very clear on, I am just contributing like everybody else. And at the end of the round, I will speak as facilitator. In the middle, I'm speaking as me. You know, that's a little bit of a nuance. But none of that stuff is dogmatic. You can also put yourself, you know, for example, if you have a group of 5 and you want to switch the order around from time to time, then maybe you're first or last, or you're the one who knows a lot, like whatever, you know, like there's different situations. But then it helps to make it clear and say like, okay, let me just put my facilitator hat on for a moment. Let's do a second round on this one or whatever, you know, like you would make that very clean, ideally. Did I see a hand there that then went down?
It was me. I was thinking through because I
Mhm.
don't know if we're going to go back to this and be put into groups to go through these steps again. So I think just thinking through the question that Jonae posed and then our thoughts about even just our group as an example. So as we're going through, I know that the beginning was for clarifying questions. You introduced the proposal. People can ask if they're like confused about the proposal, they can ask questions. And then the second round, because what we were doing was we asked clarifying questions. Then we went into a round of everyone asking questions that they had, like, you know, for example, one that was brought up was, maybe we can change the times, maybe we can do this. So we were kind of going through that. And then we started to move towards, this might work better. So then I think it was almost like creating amendments. And so that's how we were moving through the conversation. As a group, we moved through. But I think that the question came from, and I think what you just said too, the facilitator can kind of change. Like I can take my facilitator hat off and become a part of the group. And then if facilitation is needed, like for example, we're going off topic or we are doing, you know, whatever is not kind of focused on what it is that we're supposed to do, I'll put my facilitator hat back on to bring us back together. And so in that way, what was happening was we were kind of switching roles. So it kind of felt like, okay, well, you proposed it, but now you're in the conversation. Are you the facilitator? What is your role? You're kind of everywhere. But you kind of answered that in that maybe the facilitator can switch roles throughout the conversation as long as they are able to become the facilitator again and bring us all back to wherever we are. But as we are moving through each section, is that the correct way? So is it starting with clarifying questions, then moving into the reaction round being, I think there might have been confusion around the reaction round. Is that the round where you're asking questions and then kind of like what Kelsey said, knowing the difference between a reaction and a question, I think. So I think it might have been that reaction round that we were confused about. What is it that we're actually supposed to be doing during this time? And the questions that Jonae asked really brought us back like, wait a second, okay, like let's think about format. Let's think about how we might, like Maria said, we might be going back to what we're used to versus following format. So I guess my question is more so around that reaction round. Are we supposed to be what are we supposed to be doing during that round before we go to the decision-making round?
Yes. Okay, here's what I suggest. I think what we should do is, I will tell you the next piece, which is about what happens if somebody objects, so that we have all the pieces of information in one go. And then I would like to do an example with 3 of you where I facilitate and we go through it kind of in a clean way. We can do some careful commentary, but more showing than telling. But let's do that. Yeah, and all of those things, they need a little bit of time to kind of shake themselves out a little bit. It's also only so much one can talk about. It's more kind of inhabiting that space more, I think. Wait, there was one more thing. Pre-round agreements. What's the prep? Well, yeah, ideally, as I said, if everybody knows how to dance a certain dance, it's much easier to dance it. So you get to the dancing faster if everybody is on the same page. So ideally, people are trained. If they're not trained, it's possible as well. But then the facilitator has to work harder. Possible, you know, what I do, like, for example, if you were to try this out with an untrained group, you would need to be very explicit in front of every round. I can show that actually in the fishbowl. Let me write that down. If you give very good prompts and very tight prompts, you can sometimes save the day a little. Okay. Okay, okay, looks like we're all caught up on questions. Let me go to now, what do we do with objections? The interesting thing about objections in the system, and that's a little bit of a head turner, honestly, is that all of a sudden in the system, just by how we defined it, objections are a good thing. Let me explain. As soon as my computer is ready, that is. Come on. You see, what if somebody objects? I mean, not right now, because yes, now you do. Okay, why are objections gifts? Well, if somebody consents, they're telling us that they're confident that this proposal will further our aim. If they object, they are telling us that they have good reasons to think that this proposal will undermine our aim. In what universe would you hear your colleague say, I think this will harm what we're trying to do together, and not say anything but thank you? Like, in what universe would you say, oh, you think that's not going to work? Well, I don't care. Like, why would you do that? You know, it just makes no sense. Once you understand consent, objections have to be something you're grateful for. Because if you're not there to further your aim, then what are you doing? So if the aim is the thing that we're all looking towards and that we're all showing up for, we need to align everything we do around the aim. So an objection helps us stay on course. And basically, it's a little bit like, I know somebody explains it like having sensors, like, you know, like we're all kind of sensors with an S, like we're all sensing, like, is there any kind of mismatch? No, okay, I think we're good to go. But we're all looking at it from a different perspective. And if one of us sees something, they'll say, oop, actually, I see a reason of why this isn't working. So having the collective hive mind on it is a good idea. And by the way, this process is made for smallish groups because it comes from a system where we distribute decision-making, just as a side comment. This has a harder time in a group of 60 people. It's theoretically possible, but it's not as much fun because people are not as much in a shared space. The larger the groups, the more you lose that cohesiveness, but that's a side comment. Okay. Now, the steps. If somebody has an objection, we're basically just taking a little detour. And those who are observant will have noticed that I kept the color coding the same, because what happens is basically the same: understand, explore, decide. That's what I have people repeat again and again and again in my longer classes. Understand, explore, decide. That's the order. So if somebody brings an objection, the first goal is to understand what they're saying. And that can mean, even it's a rather extreme case, but it can mean that we do a whole round just asking questions about the objection. But it can also mean that the facilitator reflects back and says, you know, I hear that you're objecting because you're worried about this and this and that in relationship to our aim. Did I get it? And then the objector says, yeah, exactly. Yes, that. I'm like, okay, I think we understand it. Thank you. It can also be that the facilitator has no idea where the person is going and then asks help somewhere else, you know, but the goal is, however you get there, to together wrap your heads around the objection. The next one. Now we're exploring what we could do. And the interesting thing here is that because the aim is shared and the proposal is shared in the group, objections are also shared. They are all shared responsibility. So we're not saying, well, if you object, then you have to bring a better idea. No, because I care about the aim and the proposal just as much as the objector does. So we together figure out what we can do. We're unburdening the person who already had the burden of being the one who noticed. So that's why ideally this is around, and we say, okay, now everybody put your thinking hats on. What could we do here? And then there's a new proposal. And here, by the way, this is a question that came up a little bit between the lines earlier. Who makes these new proposals? And my colleague and I, we wrote what we knew would become the manual for this, and we heavily discussed this one. And we decided to actually stipulate that it is the facilitator who initiates proposals, like who basically gives their blessing to a proposal. Otherwise, you have a lot of people saying, I propose this, well, I propose that, well, I propose this. And you're still in a position where nobody knows what's actually happening. So that's why we say everybody can make suggestions. The facilitator wraps it into a proposal, or says, hey, Casey, can you make a proposal, please? But I, as facilitator, have to initiate that so that it's just one proposal at a time. That's pretty important. That's just one of the places where it can fall down, because otherwise we're going to talk forever here until some solution magically falls from the sky that satisfies everybody. And so it's easy to get stuck here, and it's easy to get stuck here. Always at the end of that yellow, you can get stuck. Okay, so no proposal, and then we see if we have consent again. And if we have consent, we're done. If we don't have consent, there might be another round of this, and we go around and round and round until we have a decision. Now there's, time check. Yeah, there's one more thing I want to tell you, and then we'll play it. And that is that there are different kinds of amendment ideas. And the different amendment ideas, I will show them to you in big so that you have better examples for it. And we will also come up with ideas when we play it. But one of the things we can do is we can modify the proposal. We can say, oh, you have an objection to 100, this or that. How about 50? You have an objection to, I don't know. We'll see that later. I'll make more ideas later. Then we can say, oh, you have an objection to this. Would you be willing to try it out for just a little while? I hear you're worried, but would you be willing to try it? Just for 3 weeks or whatever. That's an interesting one because we're technically not changing the proposal. We're just trying it out for shorter, which is a very agile way of going about the world. And similar to that, we can also agree on a warning signal. Like, I hear you're concerned about this. Tell me what we need to pay attention to so we can be sure that it doesn't go wrong. That's super smart because, again, we're putting reality in charge. So now we're trying something out and we're agreeing on how we're going to watch reality instead of talking. So with that, we will try. And I need 3. Okay, so you're unmuted, but we need 3.
There's one comment that came through from Dina. So for clarification, when somebody gives an objection, ideally, they're not giving a modification to the proposal in that objection round. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, people do it all the time. And if it's like, if there's a pragmatic solution where you're like, fine, we'll change that one thing, let me ask for consent now. That happens, and I guess it's fine. The problem is if we get too used to that, what can happen? Let's say there's a proposal. Let's say this proposal. Let's read it real quick, and then I'll give my example. So we're organizing a camp out music festival in Vermont. Our job is to keep it safe and inclusive and enjoyable. Concert at 11 p.m. And we say that people have to stop amplified music after midnight and no acoustic music after 1 a.m., no talking about the campfire around 2 a.m., and we're going to try that the whole summer. Okay. Back to the question of, so what happens if somebody objects and at the same time gives an idea of how to solve it? The problem is that it blurs the line between, was that just their preference? Did they just want that additional thing? Or did they have an actual objection? And if you blur that line, it can easily be well, I want this and I have another idea. Oh, how about that thing that I love, And then you have to decide again who you're going to give their preference. So that's why these things are like fine-ish, but if they add to a pattern, they can become problematic. Like I could say, well, I have an objection, but I think we could also, serve tea after midnight. And like, okay, but in response to what did you just add that, Ted? And people do that all the time. I think that's the biggest trigger for me, that people just throw another idea on the pile, another idea. And I know this is a little bit of a controversial thing to say, but in my experience, and I watch a lot of groups are hardly ever short on ideas. They have a hard time on follow through. They're not poor in ideas. Ideas, there are plenty. We just have a hard time deciding and then doing it. Kelsey, thank you for the self-acknowledgement here. I mean, sometimes I'm the one. The worst thing, by the way, are counter proposals. When you say, I love this, but how about instead we do this totally other thing? It's like, well, thanks. Great. Now, what are we going to talk about? This, that, the other one? Like, thanks for making it more complicated. Okay. Now, I need 3 volunteers, please. And we'll play it fairly speedily. put your name in the chat if you volunteer.
Any volunteers, or come off mute and say you're volunteering. Okay, Victoria Zellen Cloud, volunteer number 1. Thank you for stepping up. Volunteer number 2. Dina, awesome.
Thank
Dina, am I
you,
pronouncing your name right? And Joni,
Joni.
great,
Yes.
great. Okay, here we go.
And it's Joiny, accent at the end, or like emphasis at the end.
Joni,
Joiny.
thank you for asking.
Okay, Dina, Victoria, Ted. Okay, so it's the 4 of us. So welcome, the circle here that keeps festival safe and fun. So, oh, and Victoria, since you volunteered first, would you be willing to play the person who's bringing the proposal? Is that acceptable for you? Yeah, okay. So Victoria's bringing a proposal. Because there have been all these discussions, right, about what are we going to do about like people just staying up all night, and then, you know, this is not the first time we do the festival, and some people now arrive with the little kids, and then there's always a little bit of drama around when do we actually sleep. So Victoria sat down and wrote a proposal, and the proposal is that there should be no amplified music after midnight, no acoustic music, so the guitars around the fireplace after 1 a.m., no more talking after 2 a.m. And that we're going to try that out for the whole next round of the festival in the summer. Let me first check whether there are any questions, and just tell me what your question is. We'll start with Dina. Questions?
A clarifying question. Did you say there's going to be families with young children?
Yeah, well, that's typically what happens.
Okay, thank you.
Jenny? And if you don't have any questions, just say you don't have any questions.
Just wondering where this proposal, is this proposal only, has it been only brought to us, or has it been shared like externally outside of this circle?
Victoria?
I just put it together last night based on all the conversations I've heard.
Thank you.
I don't have any questions. Victoria, do you have any questions yourself or any other information we need? If not.
No.
Okay. So let's do reactions. Let's see. Let's switch the order and start with Johnny and then myself. Reactions. What do you think?
It could work.
You done?
I think enforcement is one of the things that comes to mind. How are we going to enforce this? So, but yes, now I'm done.
Nice. I wrote that down. Thank you. That's a really good. So my turn. It's a really good point. Enforcement. I wonder about that too. But we'll see. But other than that, I think it's a pragmatic proposal. Might actually work. I feel good about it. Victoria and then Dina.
I like it. And I would be okay with the term. Well, in the end, something's got to last the whole summer. I would be interested in understanding how long we should give this to see if it's working. So ideally, we should come up with the best idea and it'll work all the way through the summer, but things don't usually turn out like that.
Thank you. And Dina, your reaction.
I think I'm really curious about it. I think the enforcement thing is, yeah, I'm in agreement with how that might get enforced if there's issues that arise with it. But it sounds fun to me.
Great. Pause real quick. So you notice, I assume we are following along. We just did questions and then we did reactions. Now I'm going to ask for consent, right? So unpause. So let's see, consent round. Let us start with Victoria. Do you consent?
I consent.
Dina?
Yes.
Janine?
I do not consent.
Thank you. And I will consent. So, okay, pause again. Where are we? We just did the consent round. There was an objection, so we get to do an extra fun loop of understanding the objection. So please explain your objection.
Yes, so enforcement was a big criteria for not only myself, but my other participants. And then another question was raised about the length of this term. And so for me, it is one summer. Okay. Is this enough to capture whether or not this is going to work? So then that is another question for me as well. So then how will we then determine if this was successful, if the summer is not enough time? Or the summer is rather the length of the entire quote unquote project is in question.
Okay, so I wrote my summary of what I heard you say into the chat. Maybe you see that there. So the enforcement unclear on how that happens, and then unclear how. Yeah, just it seems a little like we're crossing our fingers without really looking whether it's working. Pause. I'm just gonna assume that we understand the objection. Where are we here? That we understand the objection. I'm now gonna do a round. Keep it brief, just because of time. But tell me any kind of amendment ideas that you can come up with. Reminder: you can modify the proposal, so you can change something about this proposal. You can comment on the term because that's up anyway. And you can put any kind of metrics in place that would address the question of lack of clarity on what happens with enforcement, I guess, and accountability maybe, and how well this is working in addressing the issues that we've seen. So let's do, who hasn't started? I haven't started, see? So I will go first and then we'll go to Janine. So let's see, ideas for amendments. I think all of the concerns for me would be addressed if we did a review, let's say a week into the 3 days into the festival, 4 days into the festival. It's 2 weeks. So after 4 days, the first honeymoon phase is over, and then we have a little bit of a sense of the pattern. And then we would need whether we need enforcement and how it's working and so on. So if we review it after 4 days, that would be plenty for me on all of the counts. Check. Janine.
I would propose that we have 2 review windows. So after the first 30 days and then at the end of the summer. And also adding in for enforcement, a strike system, so a 3-strike system for those who are not following the rules. And then they would be removed from the festival. I'm done.
Thank you. Victoria and then Dina.
I like the 4 days as a stop and review. I'm not comfortable about the 3 strikes because it could be arbitrary, how big and how small the problem was that the incursion to the rules. What would be great, but I don't know that it's possible, is to get a feeling from the crowd, from the group. But I think this is not possible, given where people are paying for tickets, they're coming, they just expect somebody to set the rules. So Actually, I could go with the 3 strikes, so makes it simple. That there is that we have a small committee convened that know how to communicate with children, with adults, in a way that is part of our aim, safe and enjoyable, inclusive, and that those people really understand what's happening before they give them a strike. That they take them aside and do that.
Okay. Dina.
I think I agree with all of the suggestions and terms. My thought was maybe sort of what you were getting at, Victoria, like perhaps there could be people that maybe can't afford the tickets could come in as like moderators. They get a free pass, but also could maybe be the kind of like the safety patrol type folks, so that they want to be able to both enjoy, but to support the aims of the whole venue. I think that's it for me. But other than that, I agree with everything else that's been offered.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so as facilitator, and I'll pause actually. No, I will just say it out loud how I would say it. So now I'm finding myself a little like this, a lot of ideas. I think what I would do in real life is I would ask the proposer to make a proposal. So Victoria, I will put it on you if you're willing. Tell us how you would amend it right now.
The amendment would be that we do a review at 4 days into the
Mhm.
festival.
Right.
That we have a team of volunteers that are good communicators, who may want to be at the conference, but they're really happy to do this particular job. They don't have to buy a ticket because they're going to be working. So that we have a competent group of volunteers to do the enforcement, and that we give them the right to ask people to leave or insist that people leave if they do something 3 times, and 3 strikes and they're out.
Okay. Thank you. And it's kind of in the world that where this would be used, it would be obvious that after the 4 days, we could also decide something completely new. So just so you know, like we don't have to even plan further into the future. At that review, we can rewrite the rules. It's our rules anyway. So, okay. With that as the proposal, I'm going to do a consent round. Victoria, how about yourself?
I consent.
I consent. How about Jenny
I consent.
and Dina?
I consent.
Ta-da-da-da. Thank you.
I have a question about the
Yes.
since
question.
the enforcement, so we've now put the enforcement into the proposal when it wasn't there before. Is it
Yes.
possible that people would say, look, enforcement is going to have to be part of a whole nother set of guidelines, and so we'll have to make some decisions about that at another time. Is
Yes.
that's a fair kind of thing? Yeah.
Totally, yes. Basically, what we could do now, we could say, there's at least two different scenarios of how that could work. For example, one could make the proposal to say, like your proposal could have sounded like everything that was stated, plus we will commit to thinking about how to form a community moderator team. And then we kind of kick the can down the road, right? We put it in and say we will define later. Or you could say, well, with that, it is now in place. And somebody then objects and says, well, this is not clear. We don't know how to convene this group, like, okay, fine, then let's do that now, Or like, it's so when we get what level of clarity depends a little bit on the context, how comfortable people are with not knowing, how much we trust each other, that if we promise we'll define that next, that it will also actually happen. Some groups are not so great at that, right? Remembering something 1 week to the other. So it depends on all kinds of different things. But yes, this is a little bit like a Lego block system, right? Where it can happen at different moments. Hold on, let me just orient myself in time because I was just facilitating. So Now I'm back to training. We have another little while just on kind of lingering here, right? And then we wanted to give people a chance to try it out in breakouts. Am I right?
Yes, you've got
Cool.
that right.
Okay. So then other comments. I'm reading the comment that I hear. Thank you.
I have a question. I'll
Yes,
try to be
cool.
really quick though. So I really love that. That was such a great example. And I guess my question is more so during that reaction round, or I like the way that should we save the questions for the decider round? So I like the way that I want to say her name right. Is Johnny, sorry. I like the way that she asked her question after she said that she didn't consent. Is that the best way to go about it? So you'll go through it and then wait until the consent round to say, I object, and add your question in? Or what if people ask their questions during the reaction round? Should we say hold the question and then like we can talk? I'm trying to think through how that works. Because some people during the reaction, what if they say like, your reaction is, I don't like this. Or like, I don't see how this works. If that's that's someone's immediate reaction, do we pause it there? And then at the deciding round, I don't consent. Let's think through your thoughts.
Yeah. So let me use a specific example because it's a great teaching example, the question of enforcement that came up, right? Like what could have happened is that somebody in the questions round, in that first round, asks, how are we going to enforce this? And Victoria would have said, no clue. Okay, just imagine that happens. Okay, now we have an unanswered question. This could continue two ways. One is that everybody's like, I don't know either, but it's probably fine, you know? And it comes up in the reactions of, well, we don't know how we enforce it, but nobody objects on that basis because everybody's like, whatever, probably fine, you know? Or it could be that the question is unanswered. Everybody is in high alert, you know, an objection says, until I know how we enforce this, I cannot consent to this, right? Could go both ways. So questions are kind of like questions, unanswered questions, you never quite know what happens. Same with reactions, by the way. Like I remember there's like a big moment in my learning of this where there was a proposal, and the proposal, I often tell that story because it's such a good story. The proposal was that we would change all of our passwords into a cloud-based password system in our organization. And it was right before a big event. I was like, holy cow, absolutely not. You know, it's like, what? Like, that sounds like so much chaos. I don't want to do that. I would constantly be locked out of things and so on. So and I was also very overworked at the time. So in my reaction, I was basically giving like a full-blown rant, okay? But the facilitator happened to be the person who also brought the proposal, interestingly. He kept his cool and just went through the process, you know, like, okay, Ted just had a reaction. That just happened. Let me just ask for consent. And I consented because I was like, I hate the idea. I hate it. But I also know that it's the best thing. Like, you know, I think we had changed it after the event. But like just in general, I'm like, I know we have to do this, and it would always suck to do it. There will always be a little bit of a password that slips through that you somehow didn't change or whatever. So I hate it, and I think it's good for the team. So you see how even a bad reaction doesn't automatically, like, not all of these are really very different questions. I can even, like, sometimes it happens that people object to their own proposals. I've objected to my own proposals. There's no shame in that. So it is worth treating them as their own unique question, and people can come up with any kind of things that they want to.
Thank you. Because I supervise a group that asks, they push back on everything. So I was thinking about using this type of I guess like strategy with a group that asks a lot of questions or might push back immediately, and what that looks like to support them and guide them through the rest of the steps. So thank you.
Yeah, one little comment on that, by the way, because I kind of alluded to it, but I want to be more clear on it. Consent thrives in a situation where there's several things that happen. One is there's high trust in the group, you know, like, so people trust each other's and their collective follow through. Like, for example, if our integration of an objection is that we'll review it in 8 weeks, but we all know we're all gonna forget it. I'm not like, that's not how you can get my consent, you know, if I can't trust it. So there needs to be a certain cohesion in the group for that to work. Then there has to be a certain, like the group needs to be able to decide things. Like if we can make a consent decision, but we know our boss is going to shoot it down, what's the point of having this conversation? And then if there's just overall like a high, I guess, how can I say this? Sometimes there are groups that are so not used to holding power that they get very nervous and very kind of lost in the details. You know, they kind of have a hard time having a handle on, okay, how can we move this to completion? And then it's hard. I noticed that they're particularly, like, for example, academics are the worst. They're like this, they're like nailing jello to the wall, you know? Just like you can't get them to like take an idea, make it specific and commit. Like you can't get them to do that. So there's a few groups that really struggle and they don't seem to be kind of in a world where this really gels. So just as a warning, it's a contextual thing, right? It thrives really well in a situation where people are used to taking things on, trust each other, and have a thing that they can actually affect. So just something to watch out for. I do recommend it, Emma, using it with a newly formed group, because that's also when you can set that culture. I would then start with relatively short terms, for example, relatively well-crafted proposals. Like if there's a lot of scatteredness already and not a lot of track record with each other, and not a lot of understanding of the work that you're doing, then it needs good vetting and good kind of grounding and good explaining and really going like with lots of hand holding so that everybody knows what's happening. Okay.
And Ted, there was one other question from
Oh, yeah,
Dina.
Dina. Yes,
Yep.
I just see that. Hold on. Got it. Yes, and that I could have asked at the end of the clarifying questions whether there were more questions, and I probably should have, and then that could have happened. And in reality, in real life, I appreciate when people interrupt me. So just so you know, that is awesome. Like interrupting when I forget to ask that safety question at the end one more time. Okay. Although I'm thinking whether there was anything else that I wanted to say. Yeah, there was one loose end still in my head, which was that I had said that I would try to facilitate in a way one would facilitate a new group with lots of kind of explanation of what's happening next, right? And I think I did a little bit of that, more than I would in my groups kind of at home. I could have probably done a little bit more. Again, the less people know how to dance, the more you have to walk them through every step, right? And now you're going to put your foot to the right. You know, like that just needs to be more explicit then. It's also less fun. And of course, dancing is more fun when everybody knows how to do it. Shall we look at another example that you get to play beginning to however far you get? However far you get. Okay, let me see what I got for you. Oh, that's a cute one. It is a cute example. You are ooh, what just happened? Oh, I see. You are a community engagement organization, like some sort of a community center. So your organization is fostering community well-being through creative expression, inclusive engagement. That should be pretty close to home for people. You are so let's say there's a finance team and a whatever team and it, you know, like whatever. You are the community engagement team, circle in sociocracy jargon. That means what you're doing is designing and running programs that invite local residents to participate in meaningful, creative, and community building experiences. So you have a venue, do fun events, that means. Now, one of you brings the proposal to host open mic nights on Fridays at 6 at that community center with free snacks and beverages to create a welcoming atmosphere. Try that for a year. If you have no idea on what basis to object, because some topics get a little tricky, honestly, not in real life, but in these artificial situations. Like if somebody objects on the basic of the budget, for example, because the free snacks are too expensive, you don't know enough about this imaginary organization to know what to do with that. So that gets a little tricky. Of course, you can try it and then just make something up. You're welcome to. There's just a limit to how possible that is to do. But one thing that I came up with that would be a fun objection is, what if some performances include inappropriate content for younger audiences? How will we manage that? Because we might have younger people here at 6 p.m. What do we do? So you can use my objection. You can also use your own objection. So you will find yourself in a breakout. You will go to this slide, which is slide number, whatever, let me see. What slide number is that? It is slide number, come on, 19. Okay, slide number 19. I might actually make a few copies in case you want to write into it. You will have to find a facilitator. You will have to find somebody who's bringing the proposal. And I recommend you go through it from the beginning. So with clarifying questions, reactions, consent, it says everything on the bottom right of the slide. I just again recommend you don't linger in questions so too long, because you can ask questions about how many people does this venue fit? You know, what kind of snacks would you buy? That's all really, really sweet. And in reality, you would want to know, but for the role play, you don't have to know. So just kind of gloss over it. I know some people have a hard time with glossing over things. They're like, for them, it becomes really real very quickly. But just try to go easy on questions. So we're gonna have what, 15 minutes or so? You see how far you get, and then we'll come and debrief at the end.
Great. Okay, folks, so I'm going to pop everybody back into breakout rooms. If you can, again, please launch your cameras. That's helpful for folks. And if you can't, please feel free to be active on your audio channels. And here we go. We'll see you back in 15 minutes or so. Welcome back. Welcome back.
So how's everybody doing? Okay, facial expression look relaxed / happy. Are there any comments or questions before we move to closing? Anything you wanna highlight or bring up?
Ted, I was going to actually make a comment, and since we have you, the expert, I want to make sure that what I was going to say is accurate, and if not, please correct. I mean, I stepped in the middle, but one of the things I noticed is that people were raising hands and you know, as a way to say what they were thinking or questions that they had. Is it important to just kind of like see what compels people, or is the going in order an important part of the process? Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense.
Okay.
Well, there's two things here. One is, I mean, people raise their hands because they want to say something, obviously, right? Or ask something, whatever. Either they're just running on being used, that's how you make yourself heard. But in the system of rounds, you can actually trust that it's going to be your turn eventually. But I noticed that when the facilitator doesn't facilitate, so part of that is habit, right? And the habits change once you're used to a system of the standard is you're going to be heard. You don't have to fight for it, kind of, you don't have to compete for it. But even then, sometimes when the facilitator doesn't if people lose trust and being heard, eventually they will start raising their hands again. So it's an interesting symptom to pay attention to. And when I see more than one hand going up, I actually that's the reminder to myself of, okay, rounds. Like if there's too many, then it just kind of gets gets too busy. And then I was like, okay, everybody take their hands down. We're going to do rounds and you're going to get your turn.
Got it. So it's the facilitator that monitors that and makes sure that people, so that they can trust they'll be heard.
Right. And I mean, if the facilitator doesn't do it, I remember once I was the facilitator and I was not facilitating well. I was kind of too caught up in whatever was going on. And then somebody said, and it hit me deeply. That's why it's etched into my memory. He said, excuse me, I would like to contribute as well, but I don't enjoy interrupting others, so I can make myself heard. Could we please do rounds? And I was like, dang, that's on me, I don't want to bring you into put you into a position where you have to talk over me to make yourself heard. Ouch, So that really left a deep mark on me. So that's not happening as often anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had a question too, because we were talking about the open mic thing, and then I think it was Amy made a suggestion about different topics or things like that. And my feeling as a facilitator was that was kind of that wasn't the essence of what we were talking about. It was kind of going into the weeds, and I'm not sure. I wasn't sure. And Amy, I'd like to get your feedback on that. I wasn't sure that was addressing one of the concern about having appropriate content. But I was kind of on the fence about that, but I also wasn't sure what would be the appropriate way for me to stop and say, wait a minute, is this what we want to pursue?
Amy, do you want to say anything?
Yeah.
Well, I was responding to the issues of, appropriate language, and what's appropriate is different for different people. Obviously. So I was just making a suggestion based on if people knew ahead of time that this was going to be more kid-friendly event, then people would bring their kids. If they were, most of the time when I think of open mic, I think of like comedy. And to be honest, I don't really like comedy that much because I find it really, it's usually pretty rude and insulting to somebody, because that's how people often get their laughs, which I don't really find very funny. So if I see open mic, unless there's a clarification of it, I'm less likely to go to it. But that's just me. So I was responding to, if people knew what the program actually was, they would pick and choose which month they were going to go to which one, or even go to it, actually be an open mic participant, because they might like to go to the one that's more appropriate for them too. So that's why I was
So basically what this shows, besides on the content level, which also shows that people have the different preferences, Debbie, for your question, what we see is that, how do I say this? You might be sitting there as facilitator thinking, is that person on topic or are they out in the weeds, right? When really they're, in their interpretation at least, they are on topic. So just like not everybody has the same opinions on what is a good topic for open mic, not everybody has the same opinion on what is on topic and what isn't. And that makes it really hard to navigate. And I think the only thing that really helps is knowing each other. Because if you know your typical suspects that get a little bit into the weeds, this is not something that you can get perfect in the moment, because every moment is the kind of in that gray area, right? Every individual moment, but the patterns over time you can address. So if you have an ongoing group, you can say, will have feedback processes from time where you say, you know what, Amy, sometimes, I'm sorry, I'm going to pick you here. How about that? Debbie, sometimes I wonder, like, it takes sometimes a while till I see how what you're saying is related. Like, I wonder if we can find a way,
Yeah.
So to me, that's a really important insight that I think no system can give us perfection in every moment, but throughout time, it should kind of come out in the wash,
Yeah.
No,
and I didn't say anything because just that I wasn't sure.
Right. Right. I'm like that too. I tend to wait, and sometimes I wait too long. Sometimes in retrospective, I sometimes have regrets, and like, I knew they were out in the weeds. Why didn't I interrupt? Because I always take it I doubt myself before I doubt other people. That's a little bit of a pattern.
does it make sense to ask a clarifying question? Like, you know, maybe if you had asked a clarifying question and I
Then you
had a
could,
succinct way to answer it,
Yeah.
Right, right.
maybe it would have made more sense.
Mhm.
And
And
also,
And
do
the
we tend to write
interesting,
people off, you know, that, oh, like, I didn't understand what they were talking about before. Like, do I really want to call on them again? Like,
Mhm.
I'm not sure that you weren't doing that to me,
No.
but I'm just
No, it
saying, you
was,
know, we
and
could
it
get
wasn't,
into that. Yeah.
I guess part of what happened too is that then we went on to other things.
Yeah.
You know, and I felt, okay, this is, you know, this is fine. And then you were, you know, I thought it's not that your points weren't relevant. Okay.
Yeah. I got
You
you.
know, so that's fine. But I thought about saying, is this relevant to what we were
Yeah.
talking about?
Yeah.
But again,
I'm
and
fine.
I have a question within this, which is, as soon as Amy said that, I thought, gosh, every one of those topics has gross stuff and rude stuff in it. Like, that's not, and I chose not to say anything because it was like, okay, where in the process would that come in, you know? And then when somebody started summarizing the new proposal, it got into the proposal. So now it's going to be another thing I have to object to because it's not really the solution. So it gets complicated, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How not to go down a rabbit hole and get stuck there.
Yeah.
And that, let me just re-emphasize
Yeah,
that that's going to be a last thing because I know there's time for closing as well. This is not going for perfection. This is not going to be a perfect proposal. It's not going to be a perfect process either. In fact, I would say sometimes it's not very elegant, you know, but the dance is being completed, you know, you get somewhere eventually. And so as long as you have the basic steps in place, you're gonna get somewhere. It doesn't have to look pretty. Honestly, I don't care if it looks pretty, you know, like, but I want to get somewhere. So just not expecting perfection in every moment, but expecting improvement over time is the game that we're playing here. Thank you all.
And I think like just to kind of remembering what the aim is, right? Like keeping in mind what the aim is and why we started this whole conversation in this circle to begin with, I think is important. All right. Well, we're about 2 minutes out. Thank you for the ones that were with us till the very end. We really appreciate it. I mean, I think we all learned a lot today. I certainly did. And I've been doing this training a couple of times already. So it's just a matter of practice, practice, practice. Thank you, Ted, for your expertise and for giving us some grace. And as we tried some of this new stuff on and practiced it, I know it's definitely something that is near and dear to my heart because I do think, you know, as we think about equity and justice, giving people a voice, feeling like they have power over the decisions that are being made is an important part of what true equity and justice looks like. And I firmly believe that consent decision making offers a way to do that. And so thank you for being with us today. And thank you all for showing up. Please stay connected with us. Anaya will have all the links and ways you can do that. Stay connected and support Ted Rao and Sociocracy for All, an incredible organization. And he sends these incredible newsletters that continue to teach us how circles and sociocracy can work and self-governance and why it's important. So I know I eat them up every time they come in. So thanks for that, Ted. And have a wonderful afternoon. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much. This is great.
Thank you.
all.
Thank you. Really
Appreciate it.
Have a great day or night.
Night for me.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.